And then there's 2.3 million in the airport. That was for paying off their PFC bonds early. And that saved us quite a bit of money in interest. I can't remember the exact dollar amount. But that's kind of the highlight of that. The second reading will be at the last council meeting, which is scheduled for December 28th at noon.
And then Pauline will have you cover everything else on the agenda as well.
even
Then we'll
that.
open up for questions when you're done.
Okay, so 9 is standard. 10, I did not get a chance to look at that one. 11, that's for cleanup. 12, what we're doing there, 12 and 13 go together. The Public Works Department is looking at doing some improvements, some wastewater utility improvements that cost about $8.2 million. We're going to issue bonds for that. So that is what number 12 is for. The repayment method is going to be our surcharge, which is item number 13, is establishing that surcharge. Rates are not increasing. They are already built into the current rates. So this is already included in the water bill. So they don't have to worry about that part of it. 14, we have to do that for surplus property. 15, I'm pleasantly surprised that through October, our sales tax actually continues to increase over last year, and we're at 2.42% over the first 10 months this year versus last year. Considering we thought we'd be at 12.5% down, it's a 15% swing, so I'm pleasantly surprised at that. And number 16, November, we get our second half of our sales tax, and so there's a little over 18 million in the general fund at the end of November.
Thank you, Pauline. Darla Drew?
Hi, Pauline. When I was looking over stuff, that 8 million stuck out to me. So that is being paid for now by the entire city? Is that on all of our bills, or is that just in that area? Excuse me.
It is on everyone's bills. For the surcharge rate was built in for all the debt that the city would incur as part of their rate study, and so everybody's paying for it. This one specifically, it does benefit all the users as a whole. Even though it's in a targeted area, it still benefits the rest of us as well.
But it's out in the Rapid Valley area, is that correct?
I believe this one is the Elkville. Dale can probably answer that question better than I can.
Thank you, because it's a big price tag.
Any
Yeah,
other-
okay. Was Dale going to say something, or? I would like that.
Yeah, this project is Elkville Force Mains, and that is the northeast part of town. So Cabela's area, whole big drainage basin up there for sanitary sewer. So a number of years ago, we built the Elkville lift station, and it was a phase type project we always understood to get capacity for sewer in that area. So this is the next phase of that project, and that is to make the force mains larger to accommodate the additional flows from the additional development that's occurring out in that area. I'd like to mention, as Pauline had discussed, back when we did our last rate study, we built into that rate study debt service payments, and this is one of the projects that was identified a long time ago that would be coming that we would need to pay for. So I just want to reemphasize that the rates aren't going up, and this project was planned in that last rate study.
So is this the first time we've seen this as an identified item, or have we talked about this before? I guess I just don't recall.
This project, or?
Yeah, this project.
No, you've seen it a number of times. We've gone through consultant selection for the design of it. We've talked about it for years, quite frankly.
Okay, so is this one that, no, the Rapid Valley group will own eventually, or is it not?
No, this is all city infrastructure, city-owned, city-maintained, part of our backbone, if you will.
Okay, thank you, that's all. I yield.
Darla, if I might, I think you might be confusing it with our East Rapid water extension that we did with the airport and the valley, and getting some of those properties online.
I didn't know if this was even in the same group of things that we're looking at or not, so.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Pauline? Seeing nobody there, thank you, Pauline. I call up Ken Young, go through the community development items. And Ken, would you also please bring up the item that wasn't attached?
Yes, I'll address that one first. Unfortunately, there was a staff error with the agenda today for this work session. There was intended to be included a vacation of a portion of a right-of-way for 4th Street at New York Street for a parking lot for the Rapid City Boys Club. I'll just explain the process a little bit with a vacation of right-of-way. It is something that comes first to City Council before it goes to Planning Commission and then comes back to City Council in the form of a legal document. So it is scheduled for the 21st City Council meeting. So just to let you know, it will be on the agenda for that. It just got omitted from today's work session agenda. So all the legal noticing and everything has been taken care of. It was set for hearing by the City Council on November 16th to be held on the 21st, on this next Monday. So again, it's just a small portion of right-of-way there to allow for a graveled parking lot to be paved at the Rapid City Boys Club. So we can discuss that in further detail either now or the attachment for all of the information will be on your City Council meeting, and we can discuss it further if there are further questions at that time. So then first on today's agenda, or item number 2, is in regards to, it's basically a housekeeping amendment to section 17.18 of the City Code. It addresses several items, again, mostly just housekeeping. I know there was one particular question that Councilman Solomon had in regards to the conditional use permits and the authority that was established there. This is really just cleanup language for the past 15 years. This is how it's been according to another amendment that was made elsewhere, and it just wasn't caught as to cleaning up this section and how it addresses that. If you have further questions, I've got Fletcher Laycock here. The planner's been working on this particular section. He can answer more detailed questions on this. Any questions on this
Do you have
item?
any more items to cover first?
Yeah. So we have the item number 34 is the final fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant Funding recommendations. So those have been reviewed and recommendations made by the Investment Committee. And Michelle Schulke is here to review that with you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Nordstrom, you have some questions for Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question, and this will be for Fletcher, if I may. Thank you, Fletcher. Could you help me understand a little bit more about 17.18.040? It has to do with the, or excuse me, 030, microcidery. Where did that come from? It's a new one for me, so can you give me a little background?
Fletcher Laycock, current planner 3, Department of Community Development. This ordinance amendment is, like Ken said, a lot of housekeeping items. One of the things that we have changed is the item previous to that is the microbreweries, farm wineries, and artisan distilleries, which as they come forward to the city, we adopt an ordinance to allow it as a conditional use. We actually cleaned up the language so that state law, which changes occasionally, that we just amend it so it says it shall comply with state law. And then looking through that, we noticed that they have a license for microcideries, and so to stay ahead of development in the town and make it an option for people that are thinking about it, we decided to add it as a conditional use in the district. And hopefully in the future we'll see some similar changes to other districts, such as the Central Business District.
Thank you. It'll be an interesting industry to follow when it starts up. So thank you, Fletcher. Appreciate it. I yield.
Thank you, Richie. Laura, Bill, Pat, did you guys have any questions for Mr. Young? I forgot to ask Pauline.
Not really from me. None for me.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
All right.
Move on to the mayor's office items. Do we have anybody from the mayor's office here to present? And do any of my colleagues have any questions? I'm sure somebody could answer them. Mr. Stroman?
Thank you, Chair. I had a question for Ken or Fletcher. I'm sorry I didn't get in time. I just wanted to know what you crossed out on 17.18.030, number 1. You eliminated grass skiing as a permissible conditional use. I want to know what that is so I don't do it.
So it's something that we've joked about in the ordinance. It's been there for a long time, and it's, I believe, there was a hill once, and they would take trays and ski down using that tray on a hill. And rather than keep it in the ordinance, we decided to remove it. It falls under a different section, which would be recreational uses. So we're taking some of the fun out of the ordinance, but it would still be allowed as a conditional use.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Jason Solomon?
I'm assuming we're going to the mayor items?
Yes.
Okay. And this is really probably a discussion for the council, but it applies to number 5, but I think it might apply to other committees as well. Should we have non-Rapid City residents as part of these committees? I do know some of the recommendations have a couple of folks who live outside of city limits. And with this being a City of Rapid City committee, is that something we want to allow? Is it something we want to require? I just reading through it. By the way, great names that are outside the city limits, so it really has nothing to do with them. But I guess that was really the question I had, is if that's something we want to pursue or not. And with the mayor's office not here, I guess it's kind of a discussion for us. So I yield.
Anyone care to comment on that or discuss with Mr. Solomon? Darla, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Jason.
Lance?
Thank you, Jason, for bringing that up. I do agree with you on the names that have been brought up there. And maybe we do make an exception in this particular case, but if we do make that exception, do we open up a can of worms? So I guess that's what we have to decide as a council, because I'd like to see it go forward with the names selected. But that would be an exception. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill. I'll let you jump in front of Richie.
Well, I do think it depends upon whatever committee is being involved, because some of the stakeholders are from outside. For instance, right there at this solid waste thing this morning. Obviously, that affects people well beyond the bounds of Rapid City. That's an appropriate thing. Same with sustainability. I don't know whether other items might fall into that, but I think at times it's appropriate to have that outside input. That's the only thing I would say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification on the names that are outside the city limits. Are they within the 3-mile district, 3-mile zone? They are within the 3-mile zone. Okay. I think it's worthwhile having this further discussion on it. So.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the question, Jason. City Attorney's Office.
Hi, Jess Rogers, City Attorney's Office. These are all my items. So, and already I have a couple clarifications on these 3. Just to let you know, the next 3 items were all done fairly last minute. The non-union, we have no great excuse for, but the union contracts, we were negotiating until the 11th hour on both of them. And honestly, the pressure of everyone trying to get their employees raises in 2021, that's the main leverage we had in these negotiations. So everyone was trying to get something done to get on your final council agenda. So I'll just apologize in advance. I already have a couple of corrections that I'd like to run by you. But starting with item 3, this is the non-union, item 6, the non-union pay resolution. It was hard for me to figure out exactly how to get you all the information you need without overwhelming you with information that would just be confusing or unnecessary. So let me just clarify a couple of things. First of all, it does reference placing people on that new pay scale either on the next step up or they get an extra step if they were found to be below 90% of market rate in our most recent salary study. I know often we've provided these salary studies on the agenda. The reason I didn't provide you this one is because it essentially looks like this. It's a giant Excel spreadsheet. There's no narrative. There's no explanation. This is just the form it came in. So again, in an effort not to just overwhelm you with data that you would be like, why am I giving you this? This is what our study looks like. But I do have a list here of all those non-union employees in case you are interested in who was below the 90%. It's basically, there's a couple of randoms, the cemetery supervisor, the IT project manager, the building official. Then it's largely the attorneys, the HR generalists and senior generalists, the air quality specialist, the couple at the civic center, the police admin assistant, and there's one of the engineering project managers who's listed as under that percentage. So it's really just a handful of positions. I just wanted to give you that information. The other thing that I apologize wasn't clear in that resolution is the way we did this is we developed that pay scale and then we ran a bunch of different possible raise scenarios against the budget and what money we have available. And we were trying to decide what would be reasonable to bring to you within our budget comparable to the other union groups for next year. And so when we decided on, we had the money for the 1.7 COLA increase on January as opposed to July, and then placing the new people on the scale in July, what I didn't make clear in the resolution is the way that we budgeted that and the way we ran those numbers would be that you would adopt at your council meeting Monday the new pay scale as written, but the 1.7% would get applied to that. It would get, even though we would be on the old scale in January until July, we applied the 1.7 to both scales so we don't have to redo all the manual work of moving employees over. So I just wanted to make that clear that that scale will be updated. Just like it would in a normal year if we hadn't changed pay scales, you know, we wouldn't update it until we actually applied the COLA, but I did want to make that clear so that when you see the pay scale is published, the numbers will be increased by 1.7%. And I did check with Pauline, like I said, when we ran these numbers. We budgeted very low for next year because when she budgeted, it was the beginning of the pandemic. And as you are well aware, we assumed sales tax would be way down. We didn't want to commit a lot of money to raises. So we budgeted very low, particularly since the non-union group did not get any increases in 2020. Our last raise was July 2019. We got a COLA. So when things came out a little bit ahead, we did go over what was budgeted, but what we do have now available in undesignated cash. Thank you, Pauline. So do you have any questions for me? Anything else I can answer for you?
Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica, I don't need all the answers right now, and this will probably take a little bit of homework for you to provide for me, but is it possible to, and you may need a pen and paper here, so is it possible to provide the population within each pay grade and pay step? How many are in those? And then to follow up on that is the, are there employees that are going to get maxed out before they retire? Because in the past, we've run up against employees running into the max, and then about the only thing they were able to rely upon was some kind of a COLA. So, and then can you provide information on the number of non-union employees that are getting switched over to union positions as well? And then could you also provide what there are is as far as changes to the health care that's going to be coming up for those retiring employees? Basically, I'm curious about that the buyout on the end of their tenure with the cities. How does that work? Because I remember it used to be a different number for us, and I understand it's through this negotiation, something's changing in that. I don't have the full understanding of what that latest buyout is. And then are we still running, and this is true for the other two questions, or two other items on the agenda, is that the promotion of junior employees could happen with going up in their step and grade to be paid more than a senior employee. So has happened that junior employees will be compensated higher than their supervisors. It has happened before, or somebody else in a more senior grade. So those are my questions for all three of those items.
Okay, let me take those one by one, because
Sure.
some of these get into AFSCME a little bit, so let me start with the non-union to make sure I address all of those. One, in terms of getting you more data, I could give you the employee placement, but the problem I have is that with the non-union group, I've only been running those numbers since probably October, but we're not looking at placing them till July. So we already have employee turnover in the mix, so I could send you what I have, knowing that since I last ran it, some people have left, some new people have joined, so it won't be 100%.
Okay.
But I can certainly get you that. That's easy enough, so you can kind of see where people fall. In terms of employees being maxed out, the answer to that is yes in all groups. And here's the thinking behind that. When we did the salary study, which we came to you for sometime in 2019, I believe it was in the spring, you approved the money for that. One of the concerns we have is the government sort of has this reputation for, if you stay here your whole career, you get a raise every year, whether your value increases or not. So if you have a 20 or 30-year career with the city, you are arguably overpaid at the end of that. And so what we looked at with the salary study, we wanted to see, well, first of all, if that was true, and if it was true for every position. And the answer we got is it's certainly true for some positions. Others have a longer career span where your value does increase. Honestly, a lot of those are at the higher end. A lot of those are non-union, a lot of those are more specialized, a lot of those are our professional employees, which maybe isn't surprising, where your knowledge continues to be valuable, but not forever. It's not valuable forever for any employee, really. So yes, absolutely, we did what we asked the consultant for in the salary study is, I want the career range for an attorney. I want the career range for a secretary. And we built the pay scales accordingly. In our old pay scales, we had set grades, and every position we fit onto a set grade. And that grade, at the higher end, it might have a $40,000 range. Lower down, it might have a $25,000 range. Well, jobs have, $20,000 ranges, $22,000 ranges, $23,000 ranges, but we stretch them all to fit our grade. And that means we're artificially inflating some career ranges by doing that. So what we've done with the new salary scale is it has grades and steps, but you don't set on grade 1. You start at grade 1, step 3, and go to grade 3, step 2, or whatever it is. We fit those, we took your actual career range from the salary data and fit it onto a scale where the numbers match, rather than just putting it on a grade and stretching it or cutting it off, if that makes sense. So yes, there are some people, and I can get you specifics from the non-union group about how many. I want to say it's in the range of 20 people. It might be a little bit less than that. It's not a huge number. And a lot of those are on our current step 33, 34, 32. So it's no surprise to them that they won't be getting more step increases. They were already there on the old scale. And I think if you see that list, which I can certainly send to you, you'll see, yeah, a lot of these people, it makes sense that they're topped out. So that is something that'll absolutely happen. And that was something that we kind of did intentionally. Now, to your point, we do need to keep up with COLAs with that group, because just because you're sort of maxed out based on your experience and the value you bring us doesn't mean you're not subject to the same increases in cost of living that we all are. So those people would continue to get COLAs, but there is a point where the data says you're not actually adding, more value. This is basically as valuable as that job ever gets, and we do cut them off to answer that question. I don't know if you want me to jump into I guess I can talk about the people moving, because that's kind of a joint non-union AFSCME consideration. So when we negotiated the AFSCME contract, which has been happening since spring of 2019 until like 3 days ago, it was quite an extended negotiation. One of the things we looked at was the definition of the bargaining unit. With all of our contracts that we renegotiated this year, we really wanted to look at this language that a lot of times is 20 years old and make sure it still makes sense, make sure everyone understands what it actually says, and see if there are things that need to be clarified. And one of the things that I had noticed in looking at the AFSCME contract is the bargaining unit, the way it was defined, was not how we were applying it. For example, there was no exemption from that bargaining unit for professionals. So in theory, our engineers should have been in AFSCME. Well, no one ever intended that. Engineers generally aren't in AFSCME anywhere else. It was just a mistake in our drafting. So that caused us to look at, well, who else should and should not be in? One of the things we had done previously is we had interpreted that all secretaries, all admin professionals, in the city were in the confidential category. Well, that's not really accurate. What that confidential means in terms of a bargaining unit is someone who is actually privy to confidential bargaining information. So the attorneys are actively involved in bargaining these contracts. Our secretary is privy to confidential bargaining information. The mayor's office arguably is, because he is always kept in touch. The HR office is. But, you know, Dale, for example, his admin professionals aren't privy to confidential bargaining information. They may have confidential public works information, but that's not what that means. So we took all of our admin professionals that aren't in these confidential offices and put them in the bargaining unit. We did take out some of the IT professionals. It was really a career bar for them to be in AFSCME because of all the rules in the contract. Jim essentially couldn't give them the experience they needed to progress in their careers because of those rules. So we were able to negotiate with AFSCME, can we get those people all non-union so that he can hire them at a low level but train them so that they can progress. So we did take those people back. I believe GIS used to be in the bargaining unit, and we took those people back into non-union. But there were a lot of other positions that were largely in public works, and a lot of them we had deemed were professional, but they didn't really meet any definition of professional. They really are, under the FLSA, they should be non-exempt employees, and so under the definition of the bargaining unit, they should have been in AFSCME. So we made a lot of corrections. We gave AFSCME roughly, you know, and again, it changes because we have lost people in the positions, but it's roughly 32 to 35 people that went into AFSCME, and we pulled like maybe 5. So that is something that happened. And those people are just sort of moving in with the new contract. So I think that answers your second question. And the other questions about the healthcare committee and whatnot, we can certainly get into that when we get into the 2 contracts. I have a lot of information. I know I talk fast, so if you need me to slow down, let me know, because I tend to just ramble on and on. But do we want to move on to, are you guys comfortable sort of moving on to the AFSCME contract? You tell me what to do.
Let's move on to some further questions from the council, and we can jump into
Okay.
that later if we need. Mr. Solomon?
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Obviously, our city is only as good as the people who work here. We have amazing people that do work here. Question on item 6, the non-union things. You said this was done pretty hurried. Is that right? Is that what you said? Pretty rushed? You've only been working on it since October or something?
Well, I would say it was done fairly last minute. So
Okay.
I don't know if I'd use the word rushed, but.
Do the affected employees know that we've been working on this and that this is being rushed, or is this blindsiding our employees? And if so, well, I guess let me ask that question.
You know, I don't know. I think employees, you know, this group, again, particularly non-union, they didn't get any raise in 2020. So I'm guessing when they didn't see anything on the council agendas, which I know there are a lot of us who look for that to see what they're getting in 2021, I would guess a lot of people assumed they weren't getting a raise in 2021. I don't really know for sure, but.
Well, I think it's good that we give the remaining COLA. Obviously, as we heard from our finance officer, sales tax revenue's up, and we need to take care of the people that work here. It's a big investment. It's actually the thing that makes our city great, are the people that work here. Here's my question on this. I'm trying to, you know, come from the business world, so this is a little different, but for non-union, so the union would be set aside, why don't we pay for performance for non-union employees? Meaning, why don't we, I just wrote like a very brief, like what I would do if I was in this scenario. We hire employees at a competitive salary based on the market. Every 1 or 2 years, we perform a compensation study for each position to set our salary grades. Every year, we perform an annual performance review that score is tied to what that pay increase will be. We reward high performers and keep them and reward them. And if you get to the situation at the end of your career when you're maxed out, there are all sorts of things you can do. Red line bonuses, early retirements. I mean, there's a lot of options there. And I wondered if right now, if we're setting something in place that hurts, let's say you have a high caliber performer today as a non-union employee, by the time they get to their 20 year, I mean, are we discouraging people from wanting to work in the city in the first place? Because you got to put up with a lot of stuff to work here. So part of that is you can have a pretty good career though if you learn how to navigate that and you stick to it. And if you're really talented at performing really well, we should do everything we can to keep you, because talent is on short supply. Trust me, you talk to companies right now, there's a talent shortage. So if you have some in City Hall, You do not want to discourage that. And I'm not just talking about the employees that have been here, let's say 20 years with all that valuable experience that is worth a lot and turnover is really high. But we're talking about the people coming into the workforce or maybe 10 years in. My concern on the non-union side of this, the union side's different, and I get it, that's kind of the whole step and the typical government way of doing things. But why do we have to do it that way on the non-union side? Isn't there a better way to do it?
So I think that's a great question, and let me tell you what we were talking about moving towards. So one of the issues we had with the old system is we would get, generally in a year, a step, or if you were below a certain point on the scale, you might get 2 steps, and then you would get a COLA. But those COLAs were often less than 1%, so it's like a 0.7%, and then if you get 1 step, it was approximately 1.25%. So, and I think this was a holdover from before my time, but I'm guessing it happened in the sort of 2008 recession period, where your steps and your COLA together are really just a cost of living increase. It's hard to argue for merit-based cost of living increases. So what we're talking about doing now is getting back to a system where we calculate our COLAs based on sales tax and cost of living, what we can afford, but also cost of living increases, so that they're really a COLA. With the steps, what we talked about, and this is something that needs further evaluation, and this is when I say this was kind of last minute, we do have more to do. But what we're talking about internally with HR and with the mayor is going towards a merit-based step increase. So if you continue to work here and manage not to get fired, you get a COLA because your cost of living is increased. But to get that step increase, there does need to be an annual evaluation. Now I say we're working on that because that's a process, because a lot of departments don't do annual evaluations at all. So there's a lot that HR would have to step in to do to train people.
So that we don't require annual performance reviews for employees?
Department by department, and a lot of departments don't do it.
That
So
should
that's-
probably change.
That's exactly what
I
we're
would
saying
change that.
internally. No, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And so that's something we're working towards. If we can get to a system where we have a COLA that's an actual COLA, but the merit-based piece is more, that's your step increase. The issue with that, the reason it's easier said than done, the reason it's going to take some time to implement, is because Pauline budgets in like March. So how do you budget not knowing what step increases are? Do you budget for everyone getting it, and then you have money left over when a few bad employees don't get it? And so that's kind of why we're still working on this. And Nick knows, we've talked about it, the mayor knows, we've talked about. Come January, there's a lot we need to iron out here. So you're concerned about keeping good employees. That is another thing we're aware of. What we've done so far basically cuts off mediocre employees from over-earning at the end of their careers. But when I presented this to the department directors, I was pretty open that this is not the end-all be-all. I think if we're in a point where we need to keep our good engineers, say, then maybe we need to say to Dale, you know what, Dale, I think what you need to do is create a senior engineer or an engineer 2. And that way it's a promotion. So it's not that you have an engineer who just has managed not to get fired for 20 years who moves up. It's Dale looking and saying, I really don't want to lose this person, and you're topping out on our scale, so I'm going to promote you so I can keep you. So that everything we do to keep good employees only affects good employees. So it's not just this, you just happen to stay here. So we are very much moving towards what you're talking about.
Okay.
And this is just the first step in my mind.
And just know, this is my background, so I have very strong opinions about this. I will say this, I totally support the cost of living increase for the employees. I think we still have work to do on the non-union side. I think we need to flesh that out a little bit more. And it seems to me like maybe the employees affected haven't been given the proper heads up about the process. And I always think I don't like to have bad surprises when it comes to pay and performance. I think you coach along the way, and I think you bring them in the conversation, or at least give a heads up that these things are going and here's some potential so that they can be prepared for it. I think they deserve better than any bad surprises. And I don't know if it's all bad, but I think these are major changes. And the less people know, the more they yell. We know that. So I would support the COLA increase. My opinion, I think unless I hear some more information, I think it still needs some work on the non-union side. I yield.
Thank you, Jason. Pauline, did you want to jump in real quick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add, there have been communications coming out from HR a little bit as part of the process for those moving from non-union to union. I know I've had the conversations with the people in my office regarding that. I've also had conversations with the people in my office that were waiting on a new salary scale for based on the wage study. I don't know if everybody has, but I know some have. And so some of those that are moving to non-union should not be surprised, because I do remember seeing some emails going out on that probably a year ago by now at this point, because
So there's just some inconsistent communication, maybe.
or not global necessarily.
Okay.
It might just be department to department.
Thank you, Pauline. Darla Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My background is being a woman, and so I'm looking at number 8. And I have found something kind of interesting, and I'm going to read it. Offering paid maternity leave to officers after their probationary period in an effort to recruit more women and removing the limitation on how much sick leave can be used for family illness as opposed to the employee's illness. I think this is a really great step forward. I guess my question to you is, this was not offered before?
Correct, and this suggestion actually came from FOP, and we thought that's a great tool for us to, because they are always trying to get more women, more female officers, and Dawn can tell you that this is something on their accreditation, they always get dinged for the lack of female officers. So it was proposed by the union, and we thought that's great for us too.
Yeah, that's important stuff. So I'm glad to see moving in that direction. Is this on par with the other departments, or have any of the other departments adopted this? The fire department, do you have that kind of thing? Public Works, I mean, is this across the board or just for the police women?
It is just for FOP at this point.
I would love to see it be across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla. Ron Weifenbach?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate all the conversation that's gone out here, and I'm not going to try to reiterate some of the things going to be said, but I can tell you one thing, and since the police department's on here, and I just want to tell Don and his staff, I don't know how to express it, but you guys, I mean, in this time, in this era, and the divisiveness in the community, the divisiveness across the country, these people face huge, huge challenges, and as Alderman Drew had pointed out, recruiting female police officers, and I've been on the receiving end of that for running a stop sign, but I'll tell you what, she was so professional, it was beyond belief. I mean, so the efforts that Don's crew is putting in, and the efforts that the police department are putting in these challenging times, I don't even know how to thank you guys enough for what you do. I know they're not the highest paid people. I know there's people in the community that there's a lot of jobs, and I think that you've probably lost a few of them to higher paying jobs, which is, I get that and I understand that, because there comes a point in time when they got to make a life-changing event, and these guys aren't highly paid. They go home with a lot of stress every night. Sometimes the pay just doesn't cut it. So sometimes just the gratitude that we give you, Don, and I think probably everybody up here, and I know all my constituents would agree with you, and Mr. Jones is not available with us today, but I just can't thank you enough, and I can't thank your group enough, and the people that you recruited are very professional, they're very awesome. I got pulled over just the other day again because I had my headlights on, you know. But the guy was real professional. He could have turned the situation into something really bad for me. But anyway, that being said, and I want to say for the HR department, I've been here with some of these conversations that you weren't a party to when things weren't as professional as they are today. I get that, but there is some concern from my side and some of your people that work here in the city that maybe weren't deemed in your arena as so-called professional. And I've had these conversations before, because sometimes when I appreciate your frankness and I appreciate your professionalism, by the way. It's probably one of the best conversations I've ever heard from an HR person in a long time. But there is a concern in your group of the people that were transferred from these non what's the word I'm looking for? The non-union members moved into the union, and I think, yeah, did you get the email? Well, for me, context is when you're dealing with human beings, context, the point of communication is way more appropriate, and I think that we need to spend a little bit more time to bridge this gap. There's some people that have been in this city that have probably worked there for several years that are all of a sudden, boom, did you get that email? We're pulling the rug out from underneath you. We're changing things. And it may be to the good, it may be to the bad. I don't know. I'm really not familiar with all those things. But I'm not comfortable letting you move forward with anything in that arena until there's some level of comfort that I have that I can attain, that these people have a clear understanding of what they're getting to. And I agree that some of the changes need to be made. I was back in the day when when we first started doing wage studies and those things, trying to get our HR department to a professional level. There's probably more people in the HR department than there's ever been, okay? So, and I think that's important because you're in a world, and Mr. Solomon alluded to it, you're in a world where we're recruiting good people. I mean, we just got done talking about the police department and the obstacles they're up against in recruiting good people. And sometimes, you know, those people are simple as the person that's being an administrative secretary or something. And, you know, and there's some people that have been here for a while. And I would just like to see them handled in a different manner to maybe bridge that gap, that say, well, you know what, we're going to make some changes to you. To these people, this is what they do on a daily basis. It's important to them. It's their life. It's their livelihood. They may have children at home. They may have a sick spouse. We just don't know what everybody's issue is right now. And I know you get caught up in it and things happen quickly, but, you know, obviously I'm all for giving the COLA raise, all that stuff. I think that's necessary. But I also think that if there's an opportunity that we can spend a little bit more time to make sure that they clearly understand what's happening to their positions, they may have to make a life decision here, because if they're, and I think Mr. Nordstrom alluded to it earlier, if there's some things that are changing in their retirement and they're 10, 15 years into working for the city, and all of a sudden we're going to change these things to them, an email is not going to suffice me. I mean, I may have the fortitude to come forward and talk to you and do that, and I think all of us up here can do that, and that's why we're here. But some of these employees might not have that. So if there's a compassionate side of being able to come to them and say, hey, listen, and don't point them, don't like just try to segregate them out, but at least spend some time with those people specifically that are getting the changes, so they know if they have to make a life decision change, that they do it before they spend another 5 years working at the city to have those changes that they've been working for all of a sudden be pulled away from them. Maybe there's an opportunity that we can work with them to keep them under that plan. I don't think that number in a budget is going to kill our city one way or another. I don't think that will happen. So I appreciate the conversation that we've had up here. So that's all I got to say. So thank you.
Mr. Nordstrom, did you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of points. I'm glad you brought up the discussion about the employee evaluations, and I'd just like a little better understanding. You don't need to do it now, but I was wondering if you could inform us at some point in how the evaluation process is proceeding and how that's done. Coming from the union side of it is that it's very concerning that we have some favoritism one way or another coming from one individual. So if there's a standard that is used, I'd like to hear about it. And then the other part of it is I'm very okay with doing the philosophical changes, and as has been alluded to by the previous speakers, is that council members, is that we always run across philosophical changes when we see new directors coming in. And I don't mind that, but it's just making that challenge through the communications it seems to be the biggest effort. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of making sure that all the employees fully understand. And I see Joel's coming to the mic, so I'll yield to him.
You know, I was upstairs listening, and I just think there's a few things that need to be clarified. You know, I don't want, or I hope we don't all get too bogged down in the details, because I don't think we've ever had a salary study where we haven't had to make some tweaks afterwards or found like maybe we need to adjust. We've already identified a few positions where, you know, I wouldn't say they're off, but maybe there's some issues, and I think we might have to revisit some of those. But again, if we wait until we have it perfect, that Who knows how long that's going to take, and frankly, even if we think it's perfect, then we're probably going to, 6 months or a year, find out there's still some issues. I think philosophically what I think this does is, right now, we have 32 steps. And even the unions and the people we're bargaining with recognize that that's kind of ridiculous. And the reality is certain jobs have, as Ms. Rogers already talked about, certain career, and trying to fit everybody onto that 32 steps just doesn't work. So, you know, part of the problem too is, and if you look at, in generally speaking about our pay scale, is you're probably underpaid in the beginning. It takes you, there's so many steps and there was so little between the steps, it takes you a long time. So how do we get people started at a competitive, get them to a reasonable wage fairly quickly without just continuing to pay people more money because they've lived for another year? It's kind of the joke that we have around here. Because certainly most of the positions, I think you look at the city, if they make it to the 32nd step, they're probably being overpaid. So how do we pay people at the beginning of their career and get them to come to work here and not overpay them at the end of their career? And I think this is a step in the right direction. As far as changes to retirement, the only change to retirement from our side that we're really talking about, and I don't think has been finalized yet, is on payouts. And I don't think that's been decided yet, and that isn't part of this salary scale, okay? That is something that when we have done that or when we've talked about it, we've certainly talked about grandfathering in. Because if you're 2 years from retirement and you've been counting on a certain plan, how does that work? So I think in the union contracts, we did adjust the payout at retirement, but there is a certain grandfathering of certain people. But you know, if you're 10 years from retirement, you're probably not counting on that, or you have time to make adjustments. So you know, that was part of the bargaining process. But I mean, for non-union, I think we're going to look at doing something similar in the future and probably handle it the same way, where there's going to be a grandfathering. But the decision you're making now, as far as these pay scales, is not affecting anybody's retirement. The other piece of retirement that has come up is how much we pay for retiree health insurance. And certainly when we're looking at the health insurance fund and how that is doing right now, one of the expenses to the health insurance plan is paying for retiree health insurance. And frankly, that is something that is probably going to have to change or be modified in the future. Again, it's probably not going to affect the existing people, because once they've retired and they have achieved that benefit, they're probably vested in it. But you know, we need to start looking ahead for the people we're hiring now and what we're going to do with them when they retire, and that is something that we need to look at and make perhaps some changes to. But again, those discussions are happening right now at the Healthcare Committee. There are no changes for next year. The Healthcare Committee adopted and we've ratified a plan. So again, this approval of this pay scale is not impacting anybody's healthcare or anything with the retirees. And to the extent the union contracts that are also on here do that, that was negotiated with the unions, and the unions are going to approve it. So, you know, to some degree, it's the union's job to communicate those changes to their membership. So I hear all this discussion about other things, and I don't want to have the discussion or the decision on the pay scale for the non-union get bogged down with these other discussions that are going on, but really aren't impacted or really aren't affected by this decision. So.
Thank you, Joel. Mr. Roberts.
So I'm going to bog down this discussion. I'm just kidding. Jess, I was just curious. These people that are getting moved from union to non-union and vice versa, I would imagine that there is nobody that's going to be taking a pay cut.
No, nobody's taking a pay cut, no.
One of the things I'm curious about is, you know, there's been some discussion up here that some of these people may or may not have been notified. And I think maybe I should talk to Nick, because I would think this would come through your office, wouldn't it, Nick?
Yeah. Well, and thanks for that. I was going to try to get Lance's attention, but it actually came from me, so I know that it happened. And I've had personal conversations with these folks. I've had multiple emails. I have the paper trail, so I guess I take it a little personal when someone says they didn't hear about it, because I know they heard about it because it came from me. Now,
And, you know, I think that there may be a little bit of misunderstanding where people may have heard about it, but they may not understand it. I think that's possibly where this is coming.
Right. And one of the things that Jess was talking about is misidentified positions when it comes to being in or out of the bargaining unit. We don't have that ability to unilaterally make that decision. That's negotiated with the unions, and they made it very clear on the front end that they were going to pursue, like administrative professionals, through if we didn't agree to it, they were going to pursue it through the Department of Labor, who gets to make that decision. So we can say, we don't think they should be in, but they made it very clear, and they had good evidence that we bought into that, yeah, you have a good point. There is no reason. So we weren't doing it to that individual, it's that job title. And we could have pushed back, but from a legal standpoint, I don't think we would have won.
Well, legal and a negotiating standpoint.
Right.
I mean, you know, you want to make these negotiations as palatable and as easy as possible. I unfortunately worked for union for, I don't know, 15 years of my life, and I sat on that side of the table where I negotiated for the union, and I get it, and I get where you're coming from on this. So I'm just going to skip over that, because I think a lot of this can be taken care of very easily amongst these employees. I think the thing is they're probably worried about, on one side, where they're going to be financially in 2 or 3 years from now compared to, you know, and I think all of this you can take care of very easily, Nick.
Yeah.
I think it just takes more communication. While you're up there, though, I do want to discuss a little bit. Jason had brought up about performance reviews, and I think this is fantastic. I think this is a fantastic idea of promoting, you know, by merit instead of just promoting through pay scales.
Yep.
One thing I will say about that, because I've been on both sides of that, I hope if we do this citywide, this is something where these performance reviews come out of the HR office and not through the departments themselves.
Correct.
I have seen, working for government, where personalities and politics and favoritism all can play into these performance reviews. So I think you have to have an unbiased person or department that's doing it. And I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
I think that this is the only way, especially in non-union, that we can put those people to where they should be. Because there are some people that deserve to be in the middle of that pay scale after 1 or 2 years, and there are some people that deserve to be on the bottom of that pay scale after 20 years.
Right.
And if you're doing performance reviews, you know, the people that we may not necessarily want working for the city, we can weed out, and the people that we do want working for the city, we can compensate them for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this has been a good discussion so far, and thank you, Nick, and thank you, Jess, for everything you've done.
Well, and a couple things on that, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it's probably a little extreme to say we don't do performance evaluations in the city. We don't do organized, centralized, or performance
Professional?
reviews. Well, I'm not going to
No,
say
I'm
that.
just
You're
kidding.
going to say that. No, but so they are being done, but they need to be brought up to a level of professionalism that we can stand behind them when we make tough decisions. And so we've maybe not let our mid-level supervisors, we've probably done them a disservice by not educating them on how to do it, teaching them, using standardized forms and processes. And so that is a goal that we're going to get to, so I thank you for that support. And just for a quick clarification, Ron, Jess is an attorney. She's not an HR professional, and that's why she's so well-spoken. We're aiming to bring our level of professionalism up to the city attorney's office, so that's... Well, and Jason, to your point about them just finding out about this for the non-union, this isn't going into effect until July 1st. So we have a plan with the mayor's office, the city attorney's office, between now and July 1st to make sure it's right, to get everyone educated, to get it in place properly. Because like Joel alluded to, we're already finding some things we're going to need to adjust, because we've not looked at this through the lens of internal equity. Because there's two types of a comp study. There's the raw data, and then there's the internal equity piece. And that's what we're going to spend the next 6 months working on, so when it is implemented, it's right. And so I guess, I don't feel this is rushed. I feel this is rushed administratively to try to get it on this agenda. We've been working at this since mid-2019. So we still got 6 months to get it right, and we intend to take every minute of that 6 months to make sure it's right. But if we want to get the COLA in, we did kind of have to speed up and try to get this on your agenda in a fast amount of time. But we've been working at it for a year and a half. So I think maybe that message didn't quite get across. So by July 1, I can stand up here and say that the non-union is going to be implemented correctly when we make the adjustments in the next 6 months. And there will be plenty of communication. We're actually filming a Zoom right now for our AFSCME folks so they can get caught up. And so it seems like it's a last minute thing, but if you give me 6 months, I know we can get it done right. So that's my grandstand speech.
Thank you, Nick. I think we're going to move on the agenda items. If my colleagues have any other questions, they can certainly reach out to you folks. Real quick, Mr. Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate that Jess is at the city attorney's office and not the HR department. I understand. I don't think there's anything wrong with what's been presented to us, so I'm hoping not confuse anybody there. I just would want someone to step out personally, and if it takes more meetings, whatever it takes, to get to those people that are getting their jobs changed from non-union to union. To me, that would be a big deal. That's all I'm asking. If it's possible, if the rest of the council concurs, I mean, it would be one of my deciding factors on how I move forward. So just reach out to these people more in a deeper sense, because they are getting, there's a big change, and I just want to see that. But I do, again, I appreciate your frankness. I really enjoyed that, so thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Mr. Tick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to move on to items 17 to 31. That is 14 items. The first 10 of those items are standard business, so I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have about those. I do want to address the 4 sidewalk variances that are on the agenda, items I think 28, 29, 30, and 31. Those are all recommended by staff to approve the variance to not install sidewalk. Each one of those certainly has proper justification to not warrant the installation of sidewalk. So I'll stand for any questions you may have on any of the other items on the agenda.
Any questions for Mr. Tick? Bill, Lori, you have anything for Dale?
I'm good.
So am I.
The police department.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon. Just touching on I believe it's item 8, which is the FOP contract. Just want to say our folks have been working really hard, and Jess touched on that a little bit, just to make sure that we have a good one-year contract in place for our officers. 2020 has been a really challenging year, as Mr. Weifenbach has alluded to, and thank you for the kind words, by the way. But, now more than ever, and with what we witnessed this summer, we've witnessed what a bad law enforcement officer can do, not only for a region, but for a country. And we got to make sure that we have the right people in the right places, and we got to make sure that our law enforcement folks are compensated adequately. So that is a component of the FOP contract as we move forward. So just wanted to touch on that real briefly. And the other item that we have relates to a supplement for our Project Safe Neighborhood Grant. This is if you guys might remember, I was here a few weeks ago, the very first council working session, and talked about this grant. This is just an additional supplement to that grant. And we just need approval for that to move forward. So it's a no-match grant. We've been working with the ATF and others on this since 2019. The specific address is violent crime, looking to hold folks accountable that are utilizing guns with drugs and a focus on violence. So really just looking for approval to accept the funding from this federal source. So those are the two items that affect the police department.
Any questions for Don? Seeing or hearing none? Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Mr. Lowe, are you here for Parks and Rec?
Good afternoon. The only item we have coming forward is to seek proposals for professional services for Dinosaur Park accessibility improvements. Basically, this is just for the design work, and we'll be looking at this fall to get the contract and the bid going for the actual construction. So this is just for the design.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Solomon, you have a question for Doug?
Just more of a comment. This is awesome news. I know this comes from the Vision Fund, and it's going to be awesome that we'll have folks of all abilities be able to enjoy what we have at Dinosaur Park. So it's nice for us to have some good news and some positive things, and look forward to the updates moving forward. Thank you.
Jason, any other questions for Mr. Lowe? Seeing none, Mr. Evans wanted to make a quick comment before we adjourn, and I have no public comment today. Bill, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if this is quick, but I do think it needs to be addressed, and it concerns our ordinance 6454, the mask ordinance, and how it was treated last Monday night at the council meeting. I believe we're in violation of our own rules, and I did a little research, been reading the book that was given to me, Robert's Rules Newly Revised, and I believe that's the one whose rules we follow. Evidently, the subsidiary motion to lay on the table is properly used only when it's necessary to suspend consideration of a main motion in order to deal with another matter that's come up unexpectedly and must be addressed before the pending motion can be properly addressed. It's become common to misuse this to end consideration of the main motion without debate, or mistakenly assume that its adoption prevents further consideration of the main motion at all or until a specified time. But they have a motion, the tabling should not be confused with a motion to postpone to a certain time or the motion to postpone indefinitely, both requiring a 2/3 majority vote, which we did not do. The purpose of those motions is to postpone or suspend debate on a question for reasons other to consider more urgent business, which is what tabling is for. The motion lay on the table improperly for non-urgent business or its attempt to suppress debate by majority vote instead of a 2/3 vote is out of order and a violation of parliamentary procedure. And that's a quote from the book. Congressional practice, in contradiction to the rules, uses tabling to kill a measure by majority vote. But I don't believe we've got alternative parliamentary rules in place. I think we're supposed to follow that book. So I believe that we still need to vote on the motion that was left hanging because it should have been addressed before the end of that meeting according to our own rules. And I hope that our legal experts are still there, because maybe I'm misreading this, but that's pretty much verbatim from the book. So I think we're out of compliance. And I think we need to address that right away next Monday. And we need to vote on it. It doesn't require any debate. It doesn't require anything except finishing the motion by a vote. That's all I got to say. Thank you, Lance. By the way, you're doing a good job of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. We are adjourned.